Episode 823. One reason someone should refer you.
You're listening to the official BNI podcast with BNI founder and Chief Visionary Officer, Dr. Ivan Misner. Stay tuned for networking and referral marketing tips from the man who's been called the father of modern networking, along with suggestions and insights into getting the most from your membership in the world's largest networking organization, BNI.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the official BNI podcast. I'm Priscilla Rice, and I'm coming to you from Live Oak Recording Studio in Berkeley, California, and I'm joined on the phone today by the founder and the Chief Visionary Officer of BNI, Dr. Ivan Misner. Ivan, before you start, I just want to say that this is episode 823, and it's airing on 8/23/23.
I love it. Episode 823 airing on 8/23. Thanks for pointing that out. I appreciate it.
Okay, great.
So today's subject is, at first you're going to wonder why I'm talking about this, because it's a story about Shark Tank. And really the message here is, to give one good reason someone should do business with you. That's the key. So several years ago, I started watching episodes of Shark Tank. It's called different things in different countries. I know in the UK it's called Dragon's Den. And so it's called different things in different countries where investors get a pitch and they either agree to invest in the business or not. And I absolutely got hooked when I started watching it. It was probably 10 years ago I started watching it. And so like I said, it's a business reality series that shows entrepreneurs making business presentations to a panel of 5 investors called sharks or dragons, depending on what country you're in. And they decide whether to invest in the person's company. And I found that there were some serious business lessons that can be learned by viewing the show. And I saw one episode that really struck me, and it struck me as it relates to BNI. There was an entrepreneur in that episode, Raven Thomas, who had started a food business called the Painted Pretzel, which specialized in pretzels covered with chocolate and other confectionaries, things I don't eat anymore, but they sure look good. Raven had a pretty good business, and according to the panelists, her product was delicious. And after a fair amount of discussion, one of the sharks, Lori Grenier, got to the end of the conversation and asked, "Why should we invest in you?" And here's where I think there's an important lesson in BNI. I realized at that moment that this was the big question, and I knew Raven's answer could make or break the deal. And Raven replied to Lori with, "Well, the main reason is that I have 2 little kids and blah, 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 blah." She went on talking about being a mom. And I immediately paused the show. It was on my DVR. It was recorded. I immediately paused the show, looked to my now late wife, Elizabeth, and I practically screamed. She just blew it. She totally gave a relational answer to a bunch of transactional sharks.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care about the blah, blah, blah. They want something closer to show me the money. Then I love what I do. And so the key here is that you got to know your audience. Now, in BNI, we want you to be relational. That's okay. But you have to know your audience. That's the message I want to give to everyone here. Know your audience. And Beth replied to me. She said, you have to know your audience when you're talking about your business. And her statement was spot on. Before I started to play the episode again, we talked about how crucial it was for Raven to speak the language that the sharks speak. If she wanted them to invest in her, she needed to speak a language focused on opportunity, growth, return on investment, and for them, cold hard cash. Instead, Raven talked about how she felt about her business and how it related to her children, and her answer failed to include anything at all that the sharks would relate to as serious analytical business investors looking for reasons to convince them that Raven's business would be a wise financial investment. Now look, BNI is different than being on Shark Tank. I get that. But the message is not different. Know your audience. If you're talking to one audience, maybe you want to talk about your kids and family, but this was not that audience. And, I realize that some people may be thinking that's not right. That's not fair. It's not the way it should be. Well, I'm not talking about what's fair. I'm talking about what's totally predictable. The moment she started to give that answer, I knew she most likely lost all chances of getting funded because she was giving a relational answer to transactional business professionals. So I resumed watching the episode, sure that I would witness the train wreck, which was about to ensue. But to my astonishment, one of the sharks, Robert Herjavec, gave Raven a do-over. He allowed her to do a do-over, which really blew me away. And I really like this particular shark. If I were ever a panelist on a business show, I'd like to think my style would be a little bit similar to his. So Robert looked at Raven and he gave her a chance to give a better answer when he said to her, "Okay, let's do that again. Give us another answer. Give us an answer again." And she took a moment, she thought, and then she said, "Well, a good reason to invest in me is that I had to walk away from a $2 million deal because I did not have the capital to fill the order. And that door is still open."
Mm-hmm.
That answer was a showstopper. It completely captured the shark's attention. And within a few moments, Mark Cuban, one of the sharks, who also owns the Dallas Mavericks professional basketball team, offered Raven the $100,000 investment she was asking for. And he also offered distribution of her product at his sports stadium and at each location of the movie theater chain that he also owned. And of course, she said yes to his offer. And as a result, she expected her company's sales to exceed $1.2 million the very next year. The lesson to be learned here is that it's absolutely imperative to know your audience and tailor your comments to suit the people you're talking to. This is an extremely important lesson in both the business arena and the networking arena. I'm not saying to tell them what they want to hear. I'm saying tell them in a way that they will best be able to hear it, a way that's most relevant to them, addressing the talking points that they're most interested in. Now, you got a lot of people in a BNI chapter, so maybe you need to change your talking points around and have some transactional conversations as presentations, and then have some relational, because BNI is not Shark Tank, and I'm not trying to compare it to Shark Tank, but the lesson is the same. Understand the people that you're talking to. This is one of the main reasons I recommend that when you first meet people, you begin by asking them questions about themselves prior to speaking at length about yourself. The more you know about the people you're talking to, the better you're able to craft your own message in a way that effectively resonates with them. And luckily, because of Robert, she was able to do that. I have one last thought before we wrap up. Priscilla, do you have any thoughts before I give my one last comment?
I'm a big Shark Tank fan. I watch it all the time. And it's really interesting that you should use that as the example, because I think that's a wonderful lesson that we can all learn from.
Thanks. And I agree. And, go back, those of you listening, go back, you can find, I know one of the past Shark Tanks, Kevin Harrington. And if you recall, Priscilla, I think we did a podcast with Kevin on it some time ago. And
right.
So Kevin's a really nice gentleman, and he did a podcast here on bnipodcast.com. So my last comment to everyone listening is I'd love to hear your story about people knowing or not knowing their audience.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a story about you. It could be a story about someone else. If it's about someone else, please don't give if it's about not knowing their audience, please don't give their first and last name. If it is about knowing their audience, feel free to give their first and last name. But give me some stories about people that either knew their audience or didn't know their audience when they were talking, networking, or presenting at an event like a BNI meeting. That's everything I have for today, Priscilla. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Meisner. Well, this podcast is sponsored by MeisnerAudioPrograms.com. These audio programs will provide you with the tools and the inspiration to powerfully enhance your BNI experience. So check out the great material available to you at MeisnerAudioPrograms.com and then use the promo code IVAN50 for 50% off of everything. All of the proceeds go to the BNI Foundation. Thank you so much for listening. This is Priscilla Rice, and we look forward to having you join us again next week for another exciting episode of the official BNI podcast.